Hello and welcome to this session. Today we are going to talk about how to write the dissertation or the report you are going to prepare as part of the research work you take as part of your study of the Master's Program in Dietetics and Food Service Management. Well, this session is in fact general. It will kind of give you knowledge on how to prepare the dissertation. It could be for any purpose, it could be for any program, but specifically how you can write your dissertation report. Why this is important? This is important because your report will reflect what you did as part of your study. It will reflect what were the findings of your study. It will reflect your understanding of the topic and your skills for critically analyzing the problem you have taken and how you have interpreted and presented your data in the report. Therefore, it is very important that you understand, or rather get a clear idea about how to present your dissertation. Now, there is a set pattern of presenting your dissertation, and what is this format? Let us look at the first slide. As you see on your monitors, the dissertation generally consists of obviously the cover page will include the title of your study. Then comes the abstract. Then you will have an introduction section. The next section will be the review of literature, and followed by the methods, that is the material and methods section. You will have the results section. You will have the discussion session. You will have summary and conclusions of your research work. The recommendations, which is one of the very important aspect of your dissertation report, and you will have the bibliography or the references, the list of references you have used in your used while working on your research work, and the last is the appendices, or what we call as annexures. Once this format is clear, I will go through what will be included in each of these different aspects which we have covered in the format. We said the first thing is the abstract. Let's start from the abstract. You see, abstract is primarily a summary of what you have undertaken as part of your research work. In fact, it is the window to your research. Anybody who wants to know what you have done would like to quickly go through the abstract to get an idea, a feel of what your research was, how you did it, and what were the salient findings of your abstract. Now, it is very important that you differentiate an abstract from a summary. Summary will and conclusions will come in the end, but like I said, this is the window to your research. What is included? Let us look at those. The first aspect which you will cover in your abstract is what is the question being researched? What is this paper all about? Or what is this study all about? Include your problems, objective, scope of the study. Very briefly, in 2 to 3 lines, what was the study and what was the objective of the study. Next, we will focus on methods. What methodology we adopted for the study. Now, it can be an elaborate one, but in abstract, a brief description of the method, and it may include a mention of the design, procedures, sample, and the instruments you have included in the study. And next, you will talk about the findings. Only the summary of the results. The detailed findings will be reflected in the findings section. Here, a brief mention of what were the major findings and only those which were found to be statistically significant. Only those will find a mention in your abstract. So what we are saying, it is a window to your research. It is just giving an idea for somebody who is trying to understand or get an idea about what you have done or would like to refer to your work, will quickly glance to the abstract to get an idea of what you have done. And do not forget to include some keywords. Keywords are the important topics or words or aspects which you have covered within your research work. Now, these are important because for anybody who want to access your research work, once you get it published or you have presented a paper, through these keywords they will be able to access your study. Alright, so this is the first aspect you will cover in your dissertation. You will present an abstract of your research work. Next, once the abstract is there, the next section we talked about was the introduction. What is this introduction? The main purpose of the introduction is to provide the necessary background or the context for the research problem, justify the choice of the topic, not only justify the topic but the significance. Why did you undertake this result? And clearly the objectives or hypothesis of the investigation undertaken are mentioned. Let me just take a minute to explain this. If you remember that the first thing you do even before you start your dissertation or when you are planning your dissertation is to prepare a proposal, and in that proposal you remember we need to talk about the importance of the study, why we have taken this or why we are going to undertake this study. The same aspect is to be covered in your introduction. Your introduction will establish the rationale for why you considered working on this topic importance. So the rationale, the significance, the importance of taking this study is highlighted in the introduction. Now this may be maximum 2 to 3 pages if you want, and highlight, having talked about the importance and giving a little background information about the topic, you will end the introduction with your objectives. Objectives of your study or of the research work you have taken. For example, if you're working in the area of iron deficiency anemia, then if it is an intervention study, what exactly were the objectives of taking this intervention study? Did you want to test whether, say, one strategy you have used in the community, you want to assess the efficacy of that strategy? Is that your objective? Then you will spell that out. Because these objectives will actually give the evaluator or anybody who is reading your dissertation a good idea of what you wanted to do as part of your research work. In fact, I will emphasize one thing here again regarding objectives, that your objectives have to be very sound, because your entire work is based on these objectives. Whatever objectives you spell out, those will reflect in the methodology, those will reflect in the findings, and those will reflect in the discussion recommendations as well. So please be very clear, concise, point-wise, general, specific objectives of your study should be spelled out in your dissertation. Fine? Once we have done this, we move on to the next section, which is the literature review. Now, this is a very important section of your report. As you can see, the level of research, knowledge that has been developed in the field of study is very important to report, and what is already known and what remains to be investigated in the specific area of research. This is highlighted in this section. Then there are some basic definitions, concepts, principles, variables. These you will have to highlight in this section. Identify and adopt the research design, the methods, tools, techniques, instruments, whatever you are going to use in your research. if there is some literature based on it, if you need to present it here. Then orientation to the limitations, problems, difficulties encountered by other researchers, and thus avoiding the obstacles and ensuring efficient utilization of the resources. Let me look at all these points quickly one by one. We said that level of research knowledge already known. What does this mean? What we are doing when we are doing the review of literature, we are trying to understand the problem from the perspective of what is already being done in this area. That will form the basis of your research as well. You are not reinventing the wheel in case of your topic. What you are doing, you are basing your study on what is already known. And how will you know what is already known? It will be known through the review of literature. By reviewing the articles, the papers which have been published in this area by other researchers. That will give you the strength that yes, this has been worked out, this has been established, and based on this, I am working on my study now. Similarly, the other things we talked about, the basic concepts, principles, standards, you need to know what has been established. If we are talking about, say, again an example of iron deficiency anemia, what is iron deficiency anemia? We need to actually spell it out in our report, so that the clarity is that this is what we believe it is based on the standard definitions, and from here we begin our study. Then the research design you are going to adopt as part of your study. You need to talk about it. How? By studying what the others have done. You will talk about that so and so study used an intervention study to study this aspect. They used these tools. You may need to describe these processes, and you would see that this information will help you subsequently when you are at the discussion session, when you are writing your, rather interpreting your results. You will fall back on this information you have collected in the literature review. You will be able to say that in my study I observed these things similar to what was observed in the other studies which has been done. Now this will give credit to your work, and you can also take credit from what the others have done. You can, we talked about talking about the limitations of the studies undertaken by other researchers. Once you know them, if that same limitation you have felt in your study, you will get a strong, kind of a support in putting that similar limitations were also found in other studies. And suppose if you made an innovation on that, you can always say that considering this was the problem, we tried to do this and this is how it was observed. So the literature review actually gives you a good idea about what has been done in this area, which you have recorded in your report, and not only it gives a good idea to you, but even for an evaluator or anybody who is trying to read, they will get enough material to look back that if they are planning a similar study, these are the references they need to go through. And this will make your research very sound. Your understanding of the subject will also be strengthened if you do this review of literature. That is why I always ask our students to do this review of literature even before they actually, or rather when they are planning to do the research. What they will do? They will review what is, once they have decided on a topic, they will start reading, they will start reviewing the relevant literature basic to that topic. And that, like I've already said, you can do it by going to the library, picking up journals, finding out what are these research studies done on this area. If you get one study, there are references at the back of it. Look at those references, get back to those references. That's how your review of literature starts developing. And each and every article or paper you read, this you must record. because they will go in the reference section at the end. So I hope you have understood this concept of review of literature and its importance. What you are doing by reviewing is you are establishing your study based on what has already been done and what you will see what you have done, and you will get strength from this information. All right. Once your literature review section is complete, the next important section comes, the material and method. Now in this section, your entire study, what you did, how you carried out the different processes, activities will get recorded in this material and method. Remember, the evaluator is not there to see what you are doing. The only way he or she gets to know what you have done is through your report. And if you fail to document your entire process, the method you use to conduct your study, you will see that it will leave a very poor impression for your evaluator or for anybody who is trying to understand your study. They will not get a good idea of your study. Therefore, be very clear and explicit when you write your material and method section. What are the issues you need to consider? Let us look at those issues. First, as you see, is the research design. Research design should clearly describe the type of study design. What type of study design? Descriptive? Did you use a descriptive, observational, experimental, intervention, whatever? If you are doing an intervention study, you should be able to describe your intervention. You should be able to say how or what data was gathered, from whom, how, when. And remember, graphical representation of the study design would add to the presentation. What do I mean by the graphical representation or description? Whatever has been your study design, you, in the form of a flow chart, you put it down in your material and method section. I would like to show you a flow chart, the graphical description of what I mean when I say that your study design should be graphically represented. Suppose you are doing an intervention study. So you will, first of all, what you will do, you will select your study group. Once you have selected your study group, from that you will collect some basic information, say about their height, weight, whatever you want to do. So what you start doing is, like you can see on your monitors right now, this is the graphical representation of your study. What you see here is the study one. In the study one, where we did it, what were the variables you have collected, put them down. Even under that, under each, how many subjects you took. Suppose you analyze their nutrition knowledge, the anthropometry, the iron status, all that you mention here. Alright. So what we are doing, we are graphically representing the entire thing. This is the study one, the baseline. Now when we go further down, suppose you have done an intervention study. Now what is this intervention study? How many subjects you took? You see, we have here, we have 4 groups. Yeah, you look at it, there was a control, there was a supplementation group, there was a nutrition education group, and there was a nutrition education and supplementation group. So what we have done, in one graphical representation, we have described our entire study for anybody to see that how we went about. This is our research design. We started with a group in study 1, in study 2, we divided them into these 4 and we gave them treatment. What treatment? For the control, we did not give any treatment, it was only placebo. For the supplementation group, we gave them an iron supplement. For the nutrition education group, we gave them a nutrition education. Then for nutrition education and the supplementation group here, we gave both. So what we are doing, we are graphically presenting our entire study. Then next, if you see below here, we are saying we did the follow-up at 5 weeks here. And what we did in this, again we have graphically represented. So the point we are trying to say here, if you have noticed, is that in our entire study, if you graphically present that study in your material and method, so at a glance, just looking at it, the evaluator gets a good idea of how you designed your study. How did you, or how many subjects you took, what all the parameters you study, how did you do the intervention study, what intervention you gave, when did you follow them. All this, if you graphically represent this design, it gives a very good idea of the research you have taken. Therefore, always, as far as possible, graphically depict the research design which you are doing. From here, next, what you need to do is justify the methods you have used. For example, there can be different approaches to data collection. You can have a face-to-face method, you can have small groups, focus group meetings, you can have questionnaires which you can administer to your subjects. Whatever method you are using, try to justify why you are using a particular method for collecting the data in your study. If we move further, the other aspect you will consider is, suppose if you are doing some lab work, your research requires that you work in the lab, then you will use maybe some chemicals, some reagents. You must be able to describe these methods, the materials, the reagents you used in your material and method. That will give a good idea about what process material you used, and will give an idea for the evaluator also that yes, it has been done in a systematic, scientific manner. Alright, next what we need to do is describe your instruments you are using. That means what instruments? You will use questionnaires, interview schedules, each, whatever you are developing. Suppose if you are doing a nutrition education intervention and you might like to develop a nutrition package, explain the process of developing these tools. This is very, very important. Suppose a nutrition knowledge questionnaire you have developed. How did you develop? How did you identify the topics? Once you have identified the topics, how did you prepare the questions? Did you validate this tool after preparing it? Did you validate it? If you did, how did you do it? Did you pre-test it? How did you pre-test it? All that information you must include in the material and method section. Why this information is useful? Because it will give an idea about how sound your data is, because you have collected it with an instrument which is sound, which is validated. And if you explain this process, the evaluator also gets an idea about the process you have used. It is just not that you thought of 5 questions and you put them together. This entire process of validating the questionnaire is important, because the data which you collect using this will be sound. You can also, the evaluator will get an idea that it has been or the data has been collected using these questionnaires which has been validated. So there's no idea about the wrong reporting of the responses in terms of the data which you collect. Now, besides this, what other things you would do? You would also like to talk about if you are taking a procedure, then what process you used for standardizing this procedure. For example, say the example we've been taking of iron deficiency anemia, and you decide to use the Steinmetz hemoglobin method for hemoglobin estimation. And suppose if you are using this method, how did you, well, it is a standardized method, we don't need to do, but if you have using it in a community, then how did you standardized in the sense use this method with your subjects. Say, did you just took one reading with your subjects, or did you use 2 to 3 samples from your subject, and to get a standard or to get a value which is standardized. So these kind of aspects, if you need to mention in your report. Okay, and remember one thing, the instruments which you develop, the tools which you develop, say a questionnaire or interview schedule, always remember to attach a copy of this instrument in your report, preferably in the appendices or the annexure section at the end. Describe the process here, and mention that a copy of this questionnaire, the final questionnaire, is attached at annexure so and so. Now this will help the person to get back to it and see, okay, this is the questionnaire which has been developed. Any instrument you develop, even if it is a nutrition education package, suppose you're developing a leaflet, then a prototype of that leaflet either in the material and method section or in the appendices annexure section must be included. Next, what else do you need to know? If it is a field-based study, suppose I'm going to the community to collect data. Again, taking the example of iron deficiency anemia. I have gone to a slum to collect or estimate the hemoglobin of, say, children there. Now, I need to give information of the process I involved there. How did I collect the blood samples? Once I collected the blood samples, how did I transported these samples? How did I preserve them? And how did I transport them from the field to the laboratory? Naturally, the analysis will take place in the laboratory. Such information will give an idea about how particular, how systematic you were in collecting data and ensuring that the data is not, in a way spoiled. You will you will report that within 2 hours the samples were transported back to the laboratory. These will have implications in the quality of the data collected. Therefore, reporting these aspects give a clear indication to the evaluator of the efforts you have put in to ensure that you get good, authentic data. And what is also important is description of the field. Suppose if it's, like I said, a field study, it would help you to describe your field. You would like to talk about the population there, the area, that suppose it is a part of the ICDS, then a rough layout of that area, saying that this is the area which is adjoining, say, municipal hospital. This is, you can draw that hospital to say this is the area we covered. What we're trying to say is, as much possible, clearly you can depict your area where you have studied, will help in the reporting in the material and method section will help you. Besides this, one important aspect is the subject profile and characteristic. As I was telling you, that you will describe the area where you have worked. Not only the area, you need to describe your subjects. Who were your subjects? Suppose I'm working with children. Obviously, my subjects are going to be the children. How did I decide on the sample size? Did I use a statistical formula? Or did I depend on a previous study of similar kind? Whatever, you need to specify in your material and method. Also, you will need to collect data on the characteristics of your subject. For example, the age, the social class, the educational, the religion, the background of the individuals. All these information will help you in describing the characteristic of the population group you are studying. And this information in general, but particularly in intervention studies, is very important. Why? Because you will establish that if you worked on 2 groups, collecting this information and comparing it will give a good indication that yes, these 2 groups which you had taken from one population were similar in every aspect except the variable you are trying to study. So give the subject profile, characteristics. Then how did you recruit them? Or before recruiting them, how did you select these subjects? Suppose I'm working in the ICDS, and in that block there are 2000 subjects, but I need only say 150 for my study. How did I pick up those 150? Did I use a random sampling technique using the random number table? Or did I use a stratified sampling technique? So what is the sampling technique you are using? Please describe in your material and method. Besides the technique, how did you recruit them? Did you approach the households, or did you request the Anganwadi worker to help you reach out to these subjects? How did you recruit your samples? You need to describe. Besides this, what else can be? The procedure itself basically needs to be spelled out in your material and method section. So what you're doing, you are talking about your subjects. First, the research design, which you have graphically represented. You have talking about the sample, their profile, their characteristics. You are talking about the tools and instruments you're using, how you developed them, how you validated them. We have talked about these aspects so far. Is there anything else we need to do in material and method? Yes. If you look at the monitors, we are talking about the detail with respect to procedure. How was the study carried out? What activities were involved? What was the duration of your study? All these information, obviously in the graphical representation you would have given an idea, but the detailed discussion will come here. If you look at the monitor, the second aspect which is very important to be included in the material and method is the statistical analysis aspect. Once the data you will collect or you collected, how did you analyze that data? What statistical package you used? Did you use the SPSS? Suppose you are calculating the nutrient intake data. How did you calculate the nutrient intake? Which table you used? Now, that is the statistical analysis information. Did you use the calculated the mean, standard deviation, t-test, or how did you correlate, or how did you found a relationship between the variables you have collected? That must be mentioned in the material and method. And lastly, even the ethical considerations. Did you take a written permission to work with the subjects, human subjects, if you are working? These issues must be highlighted in your material and method section. I think what we have discussed so far would have given you a good overview of your material and method. Next, let us move to the result section. Now, this result section is a very important, crucial, it's actually the body of your research. What is it you have found out as part of your research work? This is what your result will indicate. As you can see, first I have mentioned, do not present any raw data in this section. Please note, no raw data, only processed, summarized, discriminatory selected data in the form of text, table and figures. What does this mean? You see, very often we have students, part of the diploma in nutrition and health education, they have to do a project work and the report has to be submitted. What we find, students have worked on only 25 subjects and the report is what? Whatever, suppose they have developed a questionnaire to collect the data. So they will just attach those filled 25 questionnaires and that is the report they have given. That is the raw data. What are we going to do with that raw data? You don't expect your evaluator to analyze, oh, the first subject said this, the second said this, the third. No, that is your task. What you need to do is to process this data. What have the 25 subjects said for a particular variable? Analyze and summarize this data and present this data in the form of text, in the form of table or in the form of figure. Maybe you can have a bar chart explaining how many responses were given for a particular variable. So please remember, do not present any raw data. Only give the text, table, figures. Your data is to be presented in form of text, tables. Then any qualitative data you have, the second point, like focus group meetings, observational data, they may be presented descriptively. Explain in details, so and so said this, particularly when you are doing, say, attitude variable. You're studying the attitude of, say, mothers about infant feeding. You can't quantify, you can't give in the form of table, but here description, that mothers feel that giving colostrum is not good, so they throw, you know. So or if what was the attitude they reflected, that I don't think it is good. You may want to give this with quantifying, that how many women had this attitude. I hope you're trying to understand what we mean by the quantitative and the qualitative. Quantitative data needs to be present in the form of tables, figures. Qualitatively, you can describe in descriptive. Further, what is a good table or a figure? Fine, you are presenting the data in the form of a table figure. But what you need to know, that it is structured. If you look at the monitor, the table and the figures should be structured. They should be clear. They should stand alone and they should have captions. This table is reflecting what? If it is reflecting nutrition knowledge score of mothers, the caption should be there. Then clearly in a real clear form, what was the variable for which the data was collected and what is the response. Next, if you look, it says data shown in table or figure should not be repeated unnecessarily in the text. Now what happens when we tell you to summarize the data in a table? What students will do? Whatever is there in the table, they will repeat that same thing in the text. Well, you will have to mention something about the table. You will have to give reference. But just highlight what is the major issue coming out of that table. That is what should come in the text, rather than saying that, say, in this age group, this much percentage, this age group, this much percentage. That we can already see. The evaluator can already see from the table. But what is it which is being highlighted? What is the major finding in this? That if you can write in your text will help you in your presenting your data. Now, these are basically what the points I wanted to talk about result. Now moving to the discussion. Begin with an overview of the findings and place it within the context of the original problem statement and the expected findings. I will talk about it in a little while. Second, include a consideration of the fine points, puzzling features in the data, inconsistent or unexpected findings. All right, let us look at this aspect in little details. I'm saying you begin with the overall overview of the findings and put it in the context of the problem. You started your thesis or your dissertation with a problem, that suppose iron deficiency anemia is a problem. Now whatever the findings you get, those findings in the context of, if it is a problem, your data is also reflecting it. So in that context you will start your discussion. You will talk about the puzzling features. Suppose while analyzing your data, you might get data which is not conforming to what should have been or what is the practice. Why it is so? You need to discuss that. Like I said earlier, when we were doing the review of literature, you might need to take references of the articles or the studies which have been done earlier to say that, say, so and so study had also studied this. And did they find similar results? If yes, you say yes, even they found the same. So our study also reflects that this is a problem. Suppose your findings are a little different than what has been studied earlier. Why it is so? You should be in a position to analyze and critically present. what I'm trying to tell you that the discussion session is usually separate than the results. Results is only reporting what you have obtained, what results you have got from your study, or what results you've obtained after analyzing your data. The discussion is a critical appraisal or comment on your findings in relation to what is already known or what the other research says. I hope I am making myself very clear on this aspect. Then compare the result and interpretation to other studies, which I have already mentioned. Alright? Discussion section must try to justify how the results have contributed to the existing knowledge and professional practice. You see, I've already told you earlier that your study should stand out in terms of significance, importance of your study. You have mentioned in the introduction section. In the discussion also, you should be able to comment on how whatever data you have collected, how that has contributed to the knowledge which is already known. So what you are doing, you are trying to critically or scientifically give an analysis of the data you have collected and giving some meaning to that data in the context of what is already known. What were the shortcomings in your study? You also faced them, and if you did face them, how did you try to overcome? So you are giving your study a actual meaning, strength by critically analyzing and presenting a true picture of your study. Now, this was about the discussion. Next is the summary and conclusion. We have already talked about abstract earlier. Abstract is different. Like I said, it is just a window to your research, a 1 page, maximum 2 page. Summary and conclusions is actually as you can see, it interprets, examine, qualify the results of the investigation and draws inferences from them. That is what is reflected in the summary and conclusion. State the conclusion of the study based on the analysis performed and results achieved. Indicate by the evidence or logical development the extent to which the specified objectives have been accomplished. Have you been able to accomplish what you started off to accomplish? If not, why couldn't you? This is what your summary and conclusion should reflect. Then you should also give alternate explanations. Suppose in your study, this is what you could not achieve. Can you give an explanation to that? Why you could not? Or why could not you get the same results? Maybe your sample size was small, maybe your intervention period was small. Now these are the issues which you need to bring out in your conclusion, in your summary. Part of it will also come in your discussion, where you are analyzing your data in the context of what is already known. But summary and conclusion should highlight and your strength and weakness of your study. These must be reflected in your summary and conclusions. Alright, now other than the summary and conclusion, I have already told you that you have recommendations based on what you find and what you recommend for policymakers that you need to highlight. I would like to talk a bit about the dissertation assessment here. Well, you will be marked out of 100 marks, and these, for doing your dissertation, you will be assisted by a guide, and this guide will allot you 40 marks out of 100 for the effort you have put in, and 60 marks is for external assessment. In this 60 marks, once you have prepared your report and submitted, this will be sent to an external evaluator, and once the report is received, you will have to defend your thesis at a viva voce will be conducted. Alright, so what you have seen, that how you go about writing your report. The different sections we have tried to. The dissertation guidelines have already been given to each and every student. Do read this. even how to, this is just the format, but how should the content page look, your acknowledgements in prototype, an example, a copy of these are already included in these dissertation guidelines. So we hope that these guidelines will help you, and what we've discussed today would help you in putting together your research in a very sound scientific manner. Thank you.